Have you ever been punished for refusing to attend an event you were never invited to in the first place? My brother-in-law spent weeks telling everyone I was jealous of his wedding. He laughed. He mocked me. He even stood up during the rehearsal dinner and announced, "Some people just couldn't stand seeing us happy." Everyone believed him, even my own sister. So instead of defending myself, I smiled, packed a suitcase, and flew to Rome. While I was watching the sunrise over the Colosseum, their dream wedding was quietly falling apart. Because when the reception ended, the venue manager walked into the ballroom with one simple question. "Who is paying the final invoice?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward the bride's family, then toward the groom, then toward my sister. Finally, someone whispered my name. They expected me to save the day. They thought I'd come running, just like I always had. But this time, I was 5,000 miles away, enjoying fresh pasta in a quiet cafe, with my phone turned off. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. But before I tell you how their perfect wedding became the most expensive mistake of their lives, you need to understand why they believed I would always pay. If you enjoy emotional family stories filled with betrayal, shocking twists, and satisfying justice, don't forget to subscribe. Every week, we share unforgettable stories that prove respect is worth far more than money. Now, let's go back. My name is Nathan Brooks. I'm 36 years old. For as long as I can remember, I was the dependable one, the responsible one, the one everyone called whenever something went wrong. Flat tire? Call Nathan. Late mortgage payment? Nathan will help. Broken water heater? Nathan knows a guy. Forgot someone's birthday? Nathan will fix it. At first, it felt good to be needed. Later, I realized I wasn't loved because of who I was. I was valued because of what I could provide. My younger sister, Rachel, was different. She had always been charming, funny, the center of attention. She could walk into a room and everyone immediately noticed her. I never resented that. In fact, I protected her growing up. When kids bullied her, I stood in front of her. When she failed college classes, I paid for tutoring. When her first business failed, I quietly covered her rent for 6 months. She cried, promised she'd pay me back. I smiled. "I know you will." She never did. And honestly, I never asked, because she was my sister. Everything changed the day she met Kyle. Kyle loved expensive watches, luxury cars, designer suits, and hearing himself talk. He introduced himself by saying, "I don't make friends with average people." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. The first time we had dinner together, the waiter accidentally spilled water near Kyle's shoes. Kyle stood up, looked at the young waiter, and loudly said, "Do you know how much these shoes cost?" The poor kid apologized 3 times. Kyle still demanded to speak to the manager. Rachel laughed. Everyone else looked uncomfortable. That should have been my warning. Over the next year, Kyle slowly changed my sister. She stopped visiting Mom, stopped calling on holidays, stopped spending Sundays together. Everything became about appearances, luxury vacations, perfect photos, designer labels. One evening, Rachel looked around my modest home and casually said, "You should really renovate this place." I laughed. "It keeps the rain out." She rolled her eyes. "You always think too small." 6 months later, Kyle proposed. The engagement party looked more like a celebrity event than a family gathering. Champagne towers, live musicians, professional photographers. Every detail screamed, money. When Rachel hugged me, she whispered, "I'm so happy you're here." Those words made me smile. Maybe, deep down, she was still the little sister I remembered. I wanted to believe that. About 2 weeks later, Rachel invited me to dinner. Just the 2 of us. For a little while, it felt like old times. We laughed, shared childhood memories. Then, she nervously stirred her coffee. "Nate, can I ask you something?" "Of course. You know weddings are expensive." I smiled. "They certainly are." She looked away. "Kyle's parents are paying for part of it. My future father-in-law says every family should contribute." I nodded. "How much do you need?" She hesitated. 20,000. I nearly choked on my drink. $20,000. She nodded slowly. I'll pay you back. I gently reached across the table. Rachel, I love you, but I can't. I've been saving that money for something important. She looked disappointed. What? I smiled. My retirement, my future, my peace of mind. She didn't argue. She simply nodded, but when she left, something about her silence made me uneasy. A few days later, Kyle called me. Not to ask, to demand. Nathan, I heard you're refusing to help. I said I couldn't. He laughed. You own 3 rental properties. You can afford it. I can. But I also have the right to say no. His voice became cold. Family helps family. I quietly answered, exactly. Then I ended the call. After that, things changed quickly. Family group chats became quieter whenever I joined. Weekend dinners stopped. Phone calls became shorter. It felt like everyone had already chosen a side. And I wasn't on it. 3 months passed. Wedding invitations began arriving. Friends posted theirs online. Relatives called to ask about hotels. My mother excitedly showed me hers. Even my cousin in Oregon received one. I waited. Another week passed. Nothing. Finally, I called Rachel. Hey, I think my invitation got lost. There was a long pause. Then she quietly said, it wasn't lost. What do you mean? Another pause. Then, Kyle doesn't think it would be appropriate if you came. I felt my stomach drop. Why? She whispered. Because he thinks you're unsupportive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've helped you both more times than I can count. I know, but it's complicated. No, I calmly replied. It's actually very simple. The next evening, Kyle posted publicly on social media. Real family shows up when it matters. Hundreds of people liked the post. Some even commented, hope everyone important is at the wedding. I stared at the screen, then quietly closed the app. For the first time, I realized they didn't just want my money. They wanted everyone to believe I had abandoned them. 2 days later, a travel advertisement appeared on my laptop. Rome Spring Special. I smiled, looked at my passport, then clicked. Book now. I had no intention of spending my weekend feeling unwanted. If they didn't want me at the wedding, I would make memories somewhere that actually welcomed me. What I didn't know was that while I was packing for Italy, Kyle was telling every guest that I had promised to pay the reception's final balance. The morning of the wedding, I wasn't putting on a suit, I wasn't rehearsing a speech, and I definitely wasn't driving to a ballroom where I wasn't welcome. Instead, I was standing on a balcony in Rome. The early morning sun painted the rooftops gold. Church bells echoed through the streets. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. No family drama, no guilt, no pressure, just silence. I smiled to myself. Maybe walking away was the healthiest decision I'd ever made. After breakfast, I wandered through the narrow streets near the Pantheon. I bought fresh espresso from a tiny cafe. An elderly couple smiled at me. A street musician played violin. Everything felt simple, real. I hadn't realized how exhausted I'd become trying to keep everyone else happy. Meanwhile, back home, the wedding was unfolding exactly the way Kyle had imagined. Luxury flowers, crystal chandeliers, imported champagne, professional photographers. Every guest was impressed. Kyle loved the attention. He walked around shaking hands, talking loudly about how expensive everything was, as if he'd built it all himself. Rachel smiled beside him, but several guests later admitted she looked nervous all day. At the time, nobody understood why. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring. Then my sister called. I ignored it too. I wasn't angry. I simply didn't want my vacation interrupted. 5 minutes later, another call, then another. I switched my phone to silent and slipped it back into my pocket. That afternoon, I joined a guided tour of the Colosseum. The guide was explaining ancient Roman history when I felt my smartwatch vibrating nonstop. 32 missed calls, 17 text messages. I frowned. Something had happened. Still, I decided not to check until the tour ended. Whatever family emergency existed could wait another hour. Back at the wedding, the ceremony had gone beautifully. Guests applauded, photos were taken. Champagne flowed freely. Kyle couldn't stop smiling. He leaned toward one of his friends and proudly said, "This wedding cost more than most people's houses." Everyone laughed. The venue manager overheard the comment and smiled politely. He had no idea what was coming. Hours later, dinner ended. Dessert was served. The DJ announced the final dance. Everything seemed perfect. Then, the venue manager approached the head table carrying a leather folder. He smiled professionally. Congratulations again. When you're ready, we can settle the final invoice. Kyle nodded confidently. Absolutely. He reached into his jacket pocket. Nothing. His smile faded. He searched another pocket. Still nothing. He looked toward his father. Dad? His father frowned. I thought Nathan was handling the balance. The venue manager blinked. I'm sorry. Who is Nathan? Kyle laughed nervously. My brother-in-law. He'll take care of it. The manager looked confused. I haven't met him today. Silence. Rachel's face turned pale. She whispered, Kyle. What are you talking about? He looked surprised. You said your brother agreed. She stared at him. He never agreed. You told me he did. No. I told everyone he would. The room became very quiet. Nearby relatives slowly stopped talking. Even the music suddenly felt too loud. Kyle pulled out his phone. He called me. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. He laughed awkwardly. He's probably driving, Rachel quietly replied. He's in Rome. Kyle froze. What? He left 2 days ago. You knew that. I thought you did. His face lost all color. The venue manager politely interrupted. I'm very sorry. But according to the contract, the remaining balance of $48,000 is due tonight. $48,000. Several nearby guests overheard. Someone gasped. Another whispered, they still owe $48,000. Kyle looked toward his parents. His father slowly shook his head. We already paid our portion. Rachel looked toward our mother. She quietly said, I don't have that kind of money. Then, every pair of eyes turned back toward Kyle. For the first time all evening, nobody was smiling. Across the ballroom, people began whispering. I thought Nathan paid for everything. I heard he backed out. No, I heard he wasn't even invited. What? He wasn't invited, the whispers spread table by table. Within minutes, half the reception knew. Back in Rome, I finally sat down for dinner at a small family-owned restaurant. The owner recommended homemade carbonara. I accepted. As I lifted the first bite, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't family, it was my cousin Emma, I answered. Nathan, please don't hang up, I sighed. What's going on? Her voice sounded panicked. The venue won't let anyone leave. What? They're waiting for payment. I quietly placed my fork down. And Kyle told everyone, you promised to pay. I closed my eyes. I never promised anything, I know. But he's telling everyone you abandoned them. I laughed softly. Interesting. Emma hesitated. Nathan, people are starting to realize the truth. What truth? That you were never invited. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Emma whispered, you should hear what people are saying. What are they saying? That Kyle used your name because he assumed you'd never embarrass your sister. I smiled sadly. He assumed correctly. Emma sounded confused. What do you mean? I'm not going to embarrass Rachel. What are you going to do? I looked out across the Roman streets, then quietly answered, I'm going to let Kyle explain his own lies. 20 minutes later, another call arrived. This time, from an unknown number, I answered. Mr. Brooks? Yes. This is Michael Reynolds, the venue manager. I apologize for disturbing your vacation. I was told you're responsible for tonight's invoice. I calmly replied, I'm afraid you've been given incorrect information. There was a pause. So, you're not paying? I was never invited to the wedding. Silence. Then the manager quietly asked, you weren't invited? No, I have the text messages if you need proof. Another long silence. Then, I understand. I think I need to have another conversation. He ended the call. At that exact moment, everything Kyle had built began collapsing, because the venue manager had just walked back into the ballroom holding the contract and asking one simple question. If Mr. Brooks was never invited, why did everyone tell me he was paying? The ballroom, only moments earlier, had been filled with laughter. Now, it was so quiet, you could hear champagne glasses being placed back onto the tables. The venue manager stood calmly beside the head table, contract in hand, looking directly at Kyle. His voice remained polite, but firm. Mr. Anderson, you informed my staff that your brother-in-law would be settling the remaining balance. Kyle forced a smile. He was supposed to, the The manager shook his head. I've just spoken with Mr. Brooks. He informed me he wasn't invited to your wedding. The room froze. Rachel slowly closed her eyes. She knew the truth had finally caught up with them. One of Kyle's groomsmen quietly asked, Wait, he wasn't even invited? Another guest whispered. Then why would anyone expect him to pay? More whispers followed. They used him. I can't believe this. I thought Nathan canceled at the last minute. No, they never invited him. Within seconds, the entire ballroom knew. Kyle laughed nervously. This is just a misunderstanding. The venue manager calmly replied, Perhaps, but misunderstandings don't pay invoices. He opened the leather folder. The outstanding balance is $48,300, and according to your signed contract. The responsibility belongs to you. Kyle looked at his father. His father folded his arms. I already paid everything I agreed to. Kyle turned toward Rachel. Tell them. Rachel stared at the floor. I can't. For the first time that evening, she looked at her husband, not with admiration, but disappointment. You told me Nathan agreed. Kyle remained silent. You lied to me. I only thought. You thought. Her voice echoed across the ballroom. You built an entire wedding budget around money that was never promised. Tears filled her eyes. You embarrassed my brother for refusing something he never agreed to. Guests began quietly gathering their coats. Nobody wanted to witness the argument. Several relatives walked over to Rachel, not to comfort her, to ask questions. When did Nathan become responsible? Why wasn't he invited? Why did Kyle keep saying he was paying? No one had answers, because there weren't any, only lies. Back in Rome, I was sitting beside the Trevi fountain, watching tourists toss coins into the water. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. I answered. She sounded exhausted. Nathan, I'm sorry. I remained quiet. She continued. I should have stopped this weeks ago. You should have. She began crying. I didn't realize how far things had gone. I looked across the fountain, then quietly replied, You realized. You just hoped someone else would fix it. She didn't deny it. That evening, Rachel called. I almost didn't answer. Eventually, I did. Her voice cracked immediately. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I should have defended you. You should have. I knew Kyle was wrong, but I kept choosing peace. I sighed softly. Rachel, keeping quiet isn't the same thing as keeping peace. It's choosing the person who's causing the pain. She cried harder. I know now. The next morning, I received dozens of messages. Some from relatives, some from people I'd never met. Apparently, someone had recorded part of the confrontation. It spread through the wedding guests almost overnight. Not because it was scandalous, because people finally understood what had really happened. One message stood out. It came from Kyle's best man. Nathan, I owe you an apology. Kyle told us you promised to cover the reception. He made you sound selfish. Now we know the truth. I simply replied, Thank you. Nothing more. There was nothing left to argue about. The facts spoke for themselves. 3 days later, I returned home. There was an envelope waiting in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was from Rachel. Nathan, when Dad passed away, you became the person who always rescued me. I got so used to it that the first stopped appreciating it. Kyle convinced me. That because you were successful. You owed us your success. I believed him. I forgot every sacrifice you ever made for me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll remember the sister I used to be. Love. Rachel. I folded the letter carefully, placed it inside a drawer. Not because everything was forgiven, because hatred is heavy, and I was tired of carrying it. 6 months later, Rachel finalized her divorce. She moved into a small apartment, found a steady job. For the first time in years, she was living within her own means. One Saturday morning, she knocked on my door. No designer handbag, no expensive jewelry, just coffee, and an apple pie she'd baked herself. She smiled nervously. I followed the recipe 3 times. I laughed. It smells burned. It is. We both laughed. For the first time in years, it felt real. Slowly, our relationship healed. Not overnight. Trust never returns that quickly. But honesty makes a good beginning. Rachel started visiting Mom every Sunday again. She stopped pretending life had to look perfect. She started building a life instead of performing one. As for Kyle, his reputation changed quickly. Several business contacts learned what happened at the wedding. People didn't stop working with him because he couldn't pay the bill. They stopped trusting him because he lied. Within a year, the luxury car disappeared. The expensive apartment was sold. The image he'd spent years creating collapsed under the weight of his own choices. One evening, Rachel quietly asked me, "Why didn't you pay? You could have afforded it." I smiled. Because helping someone and allowing someone to use you are two completely different things. She nodded slowly. I finally understand ending family isn't measured by who shares your last name or who invites you to a wedding. It's measured by who stands beside you, even when they don't need anything from you. Kyle believed money could replace integrity. He believed someone else's generosity was part of his wedding budget. He was wrong. The day I wasn't invited, I thought I had lost my family. Instead, I found something much more valuable: my self-respect. Sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't ruining someone's celebration. It's refusing to let them use your kindness ever again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that respect should always come before money. And remember, the people who truly value you will never expect your wallet to prove your worth.